Okay, now we are moving on to step 3. Again, you should have 2 layers. Your top layer should be the landscape. The bottom layer should be the jar. You should have the overlay blending mode here in your blending mode panel chosen. And it should be scaled so you're able to see the landscape and fill up the jar. Now we're going to use kind of a little trick. Now, if you've ever done a double exposure inside Photoshop or Photopea, you know the next thing we would do is create a layer mask over here to kind of clean this up, or if you've ever done any compositing. But I'm going to show you a different trick this time. If we were to just do a layer mask on this and paint through here, it wouldn't look like the jar existed anymore, because it would be as though you were literally painting away the jar. And that's not what we want. We want the physical surface of the jar to remain there and for the landscape to feel as though it's underneath. And so the reason I had you choose the overlay mode is because overlay is a blending mode that allows, when you have 2 layers stacked on top of each other like this, any place that is dark underneath the top layer is where your image will show through. That's one reason you see the image here in the darker areas of the jar. If I were to click this layer off, see, here's where my darker areas of my jar are sitting. And you can see that the image is peeking through. So what we ultimately need is we need the inside of this jar to be darker. Now, one way you could do that is say, oh, okay, well, I'll just use the paint tool and just fill it in with black. Yes, you could, but again, it's going to look very false. It will feel as though the jar doesn't exist. We want it to be a little bit hazy, a little bit fuzzy. Think about looking inside a jar of some type where there's liquid or something is full. The glass itself distorts, the light refracts off it differently. And so you want to be able to kind of keep that surface quality. So one way that we can do this is using the burning and dodging tool. Now this is going to be found over in your tools panel, or the letter O will take you there. That is the shortcut. And what we want is we want the burn tool. Now the dodge tool is going to lighten areas that we paint over, and the burn tool is going to darken areas that we paint over. The reason it's called burning and dodging is because it's actually referencing a method of darkroom photography where you would burn areas of an image in, meaning expose it to more light or making it darker. Or you could dodge areas using a piece of paper or a dodging tool or a dodging wand that looked a lot like this, and you would hold the dodging tool over the in between the enlarger light and the photo paper, and you could lighten certain areas. So this was a way for photographers to customize their exposure on pieces, and we can do the exact same thing in Photoshop or in Photopea. So I'm going to choose the burn tool because burning is going to make it darker, and I'm going to use this area. Now we have to set the tool up properly in order for it to work. And the first thing I want to do is, once I've chosen the burn tool, I'm going to come up here, and this is where my choices are. I'm going to leave exposure, I'm going to drop the exposure down to about 40%, so just a little bit less than 50. And then I need to choose the range, the area in which I'm going to want the burning to work. Now, shadows are obviously the darker areas of my image, midtones are the middle, and highlights are the bright area. I'm going to classify the inside of that jar as the bright area. So I'm going to choose highlights for right now. Then I'm going to choose a brush size. I want a pretty large size for this first sweep. So I'm just going to see here. Yeah, right around there. I can always use my bracket keys on my keyboard to make it bigger or smaller. I'm going to go about right there. That's about a size of 500. Okay. And then the hardness. This is very important, especially if you're working in Photopea. The hardness in Photopea is ridiculous. Like, it is very, very strong. We need to lower this down significantly. Come down to about 25 to 30%. Okay? We want to soften the edge. And now we're ready to go. The next step, and this is incredibly important, come over to layers and make sure that you're choosing the background. This method that we're going to do, we want to make sure that it's only happening to the jar itself and not to the landscape. So make sure that you're on background. And then I'm going to slowly start painting in. Now, if you notice, when I burn, what it's doing is it's just darkening the area of the image. And I'm actually going to click off here in a second and show you. Notice that I accidentally went over the lines there. That's okay, I'm going to show you how to fix that in a second. I just increased my brush size here just to get a better sweep. Okay. Now if you notice right now what I'm doing, and now I'm going to go, I kind of was going side to side. Now I'm going to kind of sort of go up and down. Okay. All right, so there is my first sweep and my first pass. So just to show you what's happening, I'm going to click off layer 1. And if you notice now, I've darkened inside the jar. But if you notice, it's not perfect. I don't want it to be perfect. Then I will lose that dreamy sort of murky quality of what it is looking like inside a jar. I don't want it to be perfect. So I'm going to click this back on. And the darker I burn this in, the more this image will show up. So if I wanted to then do another pass, I'll just do a second pass here. Okay, it's going to show up even more. You can overdo this, so be careful. I like working around 30 or 40% and then kind of going from there. If you notice, I'm going to come right down to the edge here. Okay. And I'm gonna just make my brush a little bit smaller, and just right here near my edges, I'm gonna be very careful, and I'm just going to kind of sweep my edges. And that looks pretty good for where I want to start. Again, let's click on this layer and you can see how much I've darkened it. And again, I don't want it to be absolutely perfect. Now, what about this space over here where I accidentally dodged or accidentally burned? Well, and also if you look at some of you might have a little bit, if you've gone over the edge, we're just going to erase that by coming to our dodge tool. So we're going to choose our dodge tool and we're going to do the exact opposite. So I'm going to increase my brush, so make my brush size a little bit bigger. Okay, I'm going to reduce the hardness. Remember, you have to reduce the hardness in Photopea. And then I'm going to brush. This time I'm going to increase my exposure. Okay, and I'm just going to erase that away. Come to my highlights here. There we go. We're working in my highlights, and I'm just going to erase that away. Now, I like to actually go around my whole jar, because oftentimes, because of the shadowing, you might notice that it's sitting outside of your jar. So if you just come in with the dodge tool, choose highlights, and just come around the edge of your whole jar, you will clean up the space. There we go. And there would be how I make my image show up. So again, you want to use your burning and dodging tool to lighten and darken areas inside your image.